Imagine breaking your arm. You rush to the hospital, right? And you get an X-ray.
Standard procedure, yeah.
Right. And the doctor slaps the image up on a light board, points to this jagged white line, and boom, you have your answer.
It's right there in black and white.
Exactly. The radius is fractured. You need a cast. Biology in that scenario is just, well, it's wonderfully precise. It's totally binary. Broken or not broken.
Right. Very simple cause and effect.
But I mean, what if I told you that the ultimate biological condition, like the one process that every single human being listening to this right now is going through, is essentially a complete mystery?
Really is, yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack this incredibly detailed, just massive piece of work. It's called the Handbook of Aging, edition 2026 by Arnaud van der Veere.
A really monumental text.
It is. Now, let me set the stage for you. Arnaud has spent over 30 years researching this topic.
3 decades.
3 decades of just looking under the biological hood. He's considered one of the foremost experts in what he terms age control.
Right.
But right out of the gate, the material stresses this really humbling reality. Despite 30 years of intense research by Arnaud and, centuries of collective medical advancement, humanity still has a long way to go before we actually know exactly why we age.
We really don't have the fundamental answer.
We don't. We know the mechanisms, we can list the symptoms, we can watch the whole cascade of cellular decline happen.
And you tracked it perfectly, yeah.
Yeah, but the root cause, the absolute best foolproof way to do it healthily, it's still a locked door.
Which I think sets a really fascinating tone for everything we're going to discuss today.
It really does.
Because we are looking at a manual that meticulously maps out the territory of human physical decline, right?
Mm-hmm.
It details the what and the how with this clinical precision.
Oh, absolutely.
Yet it humbly admits that the actual why remains one of biology's great open questions. And I think it's crucial for you, listening to this, to understand exactly who Arnaud van der Veere is.
Yes, tell them. Because his background is wild.
Right, because he doesn't just sit in an ivory tower or a sterile laboratory, theorizing about senescent cells or collagen degradation.
No, he's in the trenches.
He is fiercely dedicated to living his research by example.
This is definitely not just some academic exercise for him. The source material notes this pretty dramatic personal history.
It's an incredible story, really.
It is. Arnaud was actually born with severe health challenges. He was predicted to die young.
The doctors didn't give him much of a chance.
The odds were just completely stacked against his physiology from day one. But he defied those odds through sheer application of his own research.
And built himself up.
He did. And now, at 66 years old, he isn't just surviving. He trains daily in Muay Thai.
With training partners who are literally half his age.
Half his age. In a contact sport.
A very brutal contact sport, yeah.
Right, a sport that demands extreme cardiovascular endurance, massive joint flexibility, and incredibly high bone density just to absorb the impact of strikes.
You have to be practically made of iron.
Exactly. He is taking roundhouse kicks to the ribs at an age where, a lot of people are worrying about stepping off a curb too hard.
It's a stunning validation of his underlying philosophy, honestly.
It really is.
And that philosophy is the beating heart of this entire handbook. Arnaud's core argument is that healthy living does not magically start the day you find your first gray hair.
Or when you feel that first twinge of arthritis in your knee.
Exactly. Healthy living starts directly after birth. Every single step, every dietary choice, every movement habit, it all compounds over decades.
Like a biological savings account.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You are building the physiological bank account that you will draw from in your 70s and 80s.
There is a massive caveat to that, though, in the book.
A very important point.
He is explicitly clear that we shouldn't let this knowledge turn into a neurosis. The goal of age control isn't immortality.
You can't live forever.
Right. It's not about trying to freeze time or construct some impenetrable fortress against the universe. It's about lowering our dependence on pharmaceuticals and maximizing the quality of the life we actually have.
Yeah, quality over infinite quantity.
And he issues this very stark warning. He says, if you try to consciously control every second of your life to be perfectly healthy, meticulously tracking every calorie and stressing over every minor symptom,
you'll destroy yourself.
You will literally stress yourself to death. Cortisol is a killer.
It's a profound paradox, really. The stress of trying to achieve perfect health will undermine the very health you are trying to achieve.
It's kind of ironic, honestly.
It is. Arnaud advocates for a state of relaxed vigilance. You build the habits, but you do not let the habits tyrannize your mind.
Which brings me to a hilariously wise contradiction right in the introduction of the text.
I love this part.
It's so good. Arnaud has painstakingly written this massive, incredibly detailed manual documenting basically everything that will eventually go wrong with your physical form.
Hundreds of pages of decline.
Yeah, just relentless detail. And his very first piece of advice to the reader: never read all, as that will be destructive.
It's a brilliant piece of psychological insight.
Don't read the book you just bought.
Right. He explicitly states that reading the entire handbook in one sitting will destroy a young mind.
Because it's just too much.
Exactly. The sheer, overwhelming volume of decay, the relentless cataloging of how the joints degrade, how the organs shrink, how the skin sags, it's just too much existential weight to process at once.
So it's meant to be a reference manual. Read when need.
Yes, that's the motto.
It functions as a mirror. You consult it when you notice a change in your own body. Like you wake up, you see a weird vertical band on your neck that wasn't there last year.
And instead of panicking.
Right. Instead of spiraling into WebMD panic and thinking you're dying, you consult the handbook.
And it provides peace of mind.
It really does. It confirms, yes, that is normal. Here is the biological mechanism behind it, and here is what you can do about it.
It completely removes the terror of the unknown.
It maps the territory.
Exactly. And since it serves as that pragmatic mirror, perhaps we should start our deep dive exactly where you look when you consult a mirror in the morning.
Oh, I like that. Let's do it.
Let's look at the external tapestry, the most visible battlegrounds of aging: the face, the head, and the neck.
Let's unpack the hair and scalp mechanics first. Because, the panic of that first gray hair or that first extra clump of hair circling the shower drain.
It's a universally shared human experience.
It really is. We see it and we immediately feel our mortality. So what is actually happening down at the root there?
Biologically, it's a story of microscopic factories slowly shutting their doors.
Okay, factories? I'm listening.
At the base of every hair follicle,
Wow.
you have these cells called melanocytes. These are the pigment-producing factories.
And they give the hair its color.
Exactly. They synthesize melanin and inject it into the keratin cells that make up the hair shaft. But as we age, these melanocytes gradually lose their function and die off.
They just close up shop.
Yeah, they do. And without that constant injection of melanin, the hair grows in completely unpigmented, which means it appears gray or white.
Wow.
And at the very same time, the sebaceous glands attached to those follicles experience a dramatic drop in production.
Wait, what are sebaceous glands doing for the hair?
They produce sebum, which is the natural waxy oil that coats the hair shaft. It keeps it hydrated and protected from the environment.
Oh, so that's why gray hair feels so different.
Exactly. The hair doesn't really change color, its fundamental physical architecture changes. Lacking that sebum, it becomes significantly drier, far more brittle, and prone to a wiry, kind of frizzy texture.
The gender differences outlined in the material here are incredibly stark, too. Men and women experience the aging of hair as two completely different biological phenomena.
That's night and day, really.
Right. For men, it is usually a genetically driven, localized retreat. The classic receding hairline forming an M shape, followed by the thinning at the crown.
That male pattern baldness is driven almost entirely by hormonal fluctuations and a genetic sensitivity to a very specific molecule.
THT.
Yes,
Right.
DHT, or dihydrotestosterone. It's a highly potent byproduct of testosterone.
So what does it actually do to the hair?
Well, in men who have the genetic predisposition, DHT essentially binds to the androgen receptors on the hair follicles at the front and top of the scalp.
And just suffocates them.
Kinda, yeah.
Right.
It acts like a slow-acting toxin to those specific follicles. It miniaturizes them over time. The follicle shrinks, the growth phase shortens, and eventually the follicle produces a hair so fine it's basically microscopic.
Or it just gives up and stops producing hair entirely.
Exactly. That's the bald spot.
Wow. But while men are dealing with DHT suffocating their follicles like that, women face a completely different psychological and biological toll.
It's a much more diffuse process.
Diffuse thinning, exactly. It is rarely a sharply receding hairline for women. Rather, it is this gradual, insidious loss of density all over the entire scalp.
The whole forest thins out.
Right. The part line gets wider, the ponytail feels thinner in your hand, and this accelerates aggressively after menopause.
Because estrogen acts as a protective shield for hair growth.
Really? Estrogen protects the hair?
It does. It actually extends the growth phase of the hair cycle. So when menopause hits and estrogen levels plummet, That protective shield is suddenly removed.
And the hair just starts falling out faster.
Yeah, the cycle shortens, and the hair sheds faster than the body can replace it. Furthermore, the brittleness we talked about earlier is often way worse for women.
Because of styling.
Exactly. It's a compounding effect of both the biological drop in sebum and decades of lifestyle factors. Chemical processing, heat styling, tightly pulled up dews.
Decades of blow drying and dye jobs.
All of it. It mechanically and chemically damages the hair shaft, making the age-related dryness so much more pronounced.
Something that never even occurred to me until I read Arnaud's material is how the actual skin of the scalp ages.
It's a huge factor that gets ignored.
Totally. I mean, when hair thins out, you are suddenly exposing skin that has been hitting in the shade for decades.
You ever seen the sun?
Right. Men who develop bald spots suddenly have a massive new surface area vulnerable to UV radiation.
Which leads directly to age spots.
Age spots, actinic keratosis, and obviously a massive increased risk of skin cancer right on the very top of their head.
And women have their own struggles there, too.
Yeah, the material points out that women dealing with the hormonal shifts of menopause often experience extreme scalp sensitivity.
The skin itself changes.
Right. Dryness and flaking, all as the skin's lipid barrier breaks down. It's just a cascade.
It really is. And moving down from the hairline, the forehead and the eyes become the next major indicators.
Ah, yes, the battlegrounds.
We were talking about the classic 11 lines, those deep vertical furrows between the eyebrows.
The frown lines.
Yeah, and the crow's feet radiating from the corners of the eyes.
I was trying to conceptualize the difference in how male and female skin ages in these areas, and an analogy popped into my head.
Oh, let's hear it.
Tell me if this aligns with the physiology, okay? It seems to me that male and female skin are like two completely different fabrics.
Okay, what kind of fabrics?
Men's skin is constructed like thick, heavy canvas, whereas women's skin is constructed like fine silk.
That is actually an exceptionally accurate physiological comparison.
Really?
Awesome, yeah. The dermis, which is the middle layer of the skin that contains all the structural proteins like collagen,
Right.
that layer is roughly 20 to 25% thicker in men.
25%. That's a huge difference.
It's massive.
Hmm.
So because men have this thick canvas skin, as you called it, they actually resist the formation of fine, crinkly lines for a much longer time.
Because the canvas is sturdy.
Exactly. It holds its shape against the repeated folding of facial expressions. But the consequence of that thickness is that when the canvas finally does fold and break down,
It cracks hard.
it creates massive deep trenches. The wrinkles are heavily pronounced gorges.
Right, like deeply weathered leather.
Yeah. Now women, possessing that thinner silk skin, they begin to show fine, delicate surface lines much earlier in life.
The silk creases easily.
Precisely. And then menopause acts as this massive accelerant. The sudden absence of estrogen drastically reduces collagen production and skin hydration.
So the silk loses its stretch.
It loses its elasticity almost overnight, leading to a global drooping effect rather than those localized deep trenches that men get.
If we follow the logic of that canvas and silk analogy, it perfectly explains a specific, highly visible phenomenon detailed in the handbook.
Are you thinking of ptosis?
Yes, ptosis, or the drooping of the eyelids. Instinctively, one might assume that women with their thinner, more delicate skin would suffer the most severe eyelid drooping.
That's the logical guess, sure.
Right. But the clinical reality is that men actually suffer significantly more severe ptosis.
Because the canvas is so much heavier.
Yes, you read my mind.
It makes perfect mechanical sense. The male skin is denser and it's heavier. Eyelid drooping occurs because of the levator aponeurosis.
The what?
The levator aponeurosis. It's the thin tendon that connects the muscle to the eyelid.
Okay, got it.
It stretches and weakens with age. It is just a mechanical failure. As that underlying support weakens, gravity pulls the thick, heavy male skin down relentlessly.
It just drags it down.
It pulls it down so far that it often creates a heavy hood that physically obstructs their peripheral vision.
Wait, it actually blocks their sight.
Yeah, they literally cannot see as well because their own skin is collapsing over their eyes.
That is wild.
Women certainly experience changes too, though. They develop creepy, crinkly skin on the eyelid, and the fat pads might protrude, but men get that heavy vision-blocking hood.
That continuous downward pull of gravity isn't just affecting the skin, though.
No, it goes much deeper.
The material discusses the ears and the nose, and the reality of what happens here genuinely surprised me.
The cartilage changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The nasal tip begins to droop, and the earlobes physically elongate.
This is a crucial distinction to make. We are moving from the superficial aging of the skin into the structural degradation of the scaffolding beneath it.
The actual framework is giving out.
Exactly. The nose and the ears are largely composed of cartilage. Over decades, the chondrocytes.
Which are?
They are the cells responsible for maintaining the cartilage matrix. They slow down. The cartilage loses its structural integrity, it softens, and it literally begins to succumb to gravity.
And for women, there is an added lifestyle factor regarding the earlobes that the book mentions.
The earrings.
Yes. If a woman has worn heavy earrings for 30 or 40 years, that continuous mechanical weight drastically accelerates the elongation.
It's just a constant downward pull.
The piercing holes stretch from tiny dots into vertical slits. The collagen and elastin matrix inside the earlobe physically tears and stretches out.
It paints a picture of the body slowly melting downward under the invisible weight of time.
It's a sobering visualization, isn't it?
It is, but a mechanically accurate one. The human face is not just skin. It is built on a complex foundation of bone, deep fat pads, superficial fat pads, muscle, and connective tissue ligaments.
Oh, architectural structure.
Right. So as the bone recedes, as the fat pads deflate and slide downward, and as the retaining ligaments stretch out, the outer skin simply has less volume to drape over.
Ah, I see.
A suit made for a larger frame will sag when the frame shrinks.
That dynamic of the shrinking frame and the sagging suit leads us perfectly away from the face.
Because it's happening everywhere.
Exactly. The forces reshaping our features do not stop at the jawline. The structural support beams are giving way everywhere.
Let's move down the anatomy.
Let's do it. Looking at how gravity, modern technology, and tissue degradation alter the torso and the extremities, starting right where the face ends, the neck.
The neck is arguably one of the most vulnerable and telling areas of the aging body. The Handbook affectionately, or perhaps brutally, refers to it in later stages as the turkey neck.
Brutal, but accurate. And if you are listening to this deep dive right now while looking down at your phone, you are actively participating in a modern acceleration of this process.
Oh, tech neck.
Yes, the text specifically highlights this phenomenon called tech neck.
It is a relatively new physiological epidemic. Think about it. The human head weighs roughly 10 to 12 pounds.
Like a bowling ball.
Exactly like a bowling ball. When you bend your neck forward at a 45-degree angle to stare at a smartphone, the leverage forces the effective weight on your cervical spine and the surrounding tissues to jump.
To what?
To nearly 50 pounds.
50 pounds, just from looking down.
Yes. That immense constant pressure breaks down the collagen in the front of the neck prematurely. It basically stamps deep horizontal wrinkles into the skin long before they would naturally occur.
Wow, so our phones are aging us.
Very rapidly, yes.
But even if we threw all our smartphones into the ocean tomorrow, the biological differences in how male and female necks age are fascinating.
The plantimal bands.
Yes, the material discusses the formation of platysmal bands. These are those two vertical cord-like structures that suddenly pop out on the front of the neck when you tense your jaw, or eventually just when you are resting.
The platysma is a very unique muscle. It is a broad, incredibly thin sheet of muscle that originates down on the collarbone and the upper chest and extends all the way up the front of the neck to attach at the jawline.
It's like a sheet draped over the throat.
Exactly. And because it is essentially a surface muscle not attached directly to bone for much of its span, it is highly susceptible to gravity and loss of tone.
That makes sense.
In women, the baseline thickness of the platysma muscle is generally thinner than in men, and as we discussed, the skin covering it is also thinner.
The silk versus canvas again?
Right. So as the platysma ages, loses its elasticity, and begins to separate into two distinct bands, those cords become starkly visible through the thin skin of a woman's neck much earlier.
And the men are saved once again by the canvas.
The thicker skin acts as a buffer.
Their thicker skin and thicker baseline muscle mass act as camouflage, basically hiding those vertical bands for a decade or two longer.
But gravity is patient. It gets everyone eventually.
It really is. Moving down to the chest and shoulders, the structural changes become intensely tied to gender.
Breast ptosis, or sagging, is obviously a profound anatomical change for women.
Why does it happen so dramatically?
Well, the architecture of the female breast relies heavily on a network of connective tissue called Cooper's ligaments.
Okay, Cooper's ligaments.
These ligaments weave through the breast tissue to attach to the deep fascia over the pectoral muscles. Over a lifetime, fluctuating hormone levels, the engorgement and subsequent deflation associated with pregnancy and breastfeeding.
Constant stretching.
Exactly. And the relentless pull of gravity stretch these ligaments beyond their elastic limit.
Hmm.
Furthermore, postmenopause, the glandular tissue of the breast itself atrophies.
Shrinks.
Yes, and it is replaced by fat, which is softer and provides less internal structural support.
The male chest ages through an entirely different mechanism, though, according to the book.
Yes, it's not really about ligament failure.
Right. It is primarily driven by muscular atrophy and shifting hormonal ratios. As men age, their natural testosterone production declines, while their estrogen levels may remain stable or even increase relative to the testosterone.
That ratio flip is key.
And this shifting ratio can lead to the accumulation of localized fat tissue over the pectoral muscles.
A condition clinically known as gynecomastia.
Right. So the broad muscular chest softens and droops, taking on a more feminine contour.
Speaking of contours, the handbook points out a very specific skeletal landmark that changes dramatically as we age.
The clavicles.
Yes, the collarbones.
It's so noticeable. As we age, we experience this widespread loss of subcutaneous fat. That crucial layer of padding situated just beneath the skin.
The body's natural cushioning.
Exactly. As that padding vanishes from the upper chest, the collarbones become starkly prominent. The skin stretched over them takes on a thin, almost translucent crepe paper texture.
It is a very clear visual marker that the body is losing its youthful volume and internal cushioning.
And while we are losing fat from beneath the skin on our upper chest and face, the body is aggressively redistributing it elsewhere.
The Great Migration.
Yes. This brings us to the abdomen and the waist, where the silhouette changes are perhaps the most universally frustrating aspect of aging.
It all comes down to the metabolic directives issued by our hormones.
It is the great shape-shifting phase of life. Men turn into apples and women lose the hourglass.
That's a perfect summary.
So why does a drop in estrogen cause fat cells to literally pack up their bags and move to a new zip code on the body?
It is an evolutionary mechanism, fundamentally tied to reproduction and energy storage.
How so?
Prior to menopause, a woman's body is saturated with estrogen, which directs an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase to store excess fat, preferentially in the subcutaneous tissue of the hips, thighs, and buttocks.
Creating that classic pear or hourglass shape.
Exactly. This fat is relatively safe, metabolically speaking, and acts as a massive energy reserve, intended for the massive metabolic demands of pregnancy and lactation.
It's a fuel tank for babies.
Essentially, yes. However, when menopause occurs and estrogen levels plummet, that directive is canceled. The body's fat storage pattern reverts to a more androgenic or male pattern distribution.
So the fat stops going to the hips and starts migrating to the belly.
Exactly. It accumulates as visceral fat.
Visceral fat, that's the dangerous kind.
Right.
Fair.
Dangerous. It's fat that is stored deep within the abdominal cavity, wrapping around the internal organs like the liver and intestines. This deep fat pushes the entire abdominal wall outward.
And men default to this much earlier.
Yes, men lacking the high estrogen levels to begin with default to this visceral fat storage much earlier in life. That's why they develop the classic, solid, protruding beer belly or apple shape.
So women postmenopause catch up to that risk.
The tragedy for women postmenopause is that they not only lose the culturally idealized hourglass figure, but visceral fat is highly metabolically active.
Meaning it does damage.
It releases inflammatory cytokines into the bloodstream, dramatically increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes.
It is a double blow. You lose the shape and you gain the inflammation.
A very cruel biological joke.
And it isn't just the front of the torso. The material outlines what happens to the back, too. It details the formation of back fat rolls.
The loss of elasticity there is profound.
It paints a picture of the skin essentially becoming a suit that is 2 sizes too big. You lose the muscle mass underneath, you lose the elasticity in the dermis, and suddenly when you twist or sit down, the skin bunches up into horizontal folds.
That loss of elasticity and muscle tone is also the primary culprit behind what the handbook refers to as bat wings on the arms.
Oh, the dreaded bat wing.
The sagging, pendulous skin hanging from the triceps.
Why is that specifically such a massive complaint for women compared to men? You rarely hear men complaining about their underarms waving in the wind.
It is a combination of anatomical baseline and accelerated degradation.
Break that down for me.
First, men naturally carry a significantly higher density of muscle mass in their upper body, including the triceps. This muscle physically fills out the skin envelope.
So there's no empty space to sag.
Right. Second, as we discussed with the canvas analogy, Male skin has a thicker, denser collagen matrix. When women age, they lose their already lower muscle mass in that area, and the rapid postmenopausal drop in collagen means the thin skin simply lacks the structural integrity to hold the remaining fat and tissue firm against gravity.
The envelope empties and the thin paper sags.
Exactly right.
Let's travel down to the legs because Arnaud's manual spends a considerable amount of time unpacking the pathology of the lower extremities.
Very detailed section.
Very. Specifically regarding cellulite and vascular breakdown, spider veins, varicose veins. The explanation for why women suffer from cellulite at vastly higher rates than men is a masterclass in tissue architecture.
It fundamentally comes down to how the connective tissue, which is called the fibrous septae, is constructed beneath the dermis.
Okay, fibrous septae.
Imagine the fat beneath your skin is held in place by a net.
All right, I'm picturing a net.
In men, the strands of this net form a tight crisscross diagonal pattern. It is like a chain link fence holding the fat lobules firmly down against the muscle.
A sturdy fence.
Very sturdy. In women, however, these connective tissue bands run vertically, perpendicular to the skin.
Like architectural columns supporting a ceiling.
Precisely. So when a woman's subcutaneous fat cells expand, whether due to minor weight gain, fluid retention, or hormonal shifts, they have nowhere to go but up.
Because the columns are blocking them from going sideways.
Right. They push upward through those vertical columns, bulging against the underside of the skin. Because the columns remain anchored to the muscle below, they pull the skin down in tiny localized areas while the fat bulges up around them.
Ah, and that creates the dimples.
That creates the dimpled, mattress-like appearance on the surface. That is cellulite. Men have the chain link fence, so the fat expands inward and sideways, not outward.
And then you add the fact that female skin thins out with age.
Exactly, making the structural unevenness below highly visible.
And what about the vascular issues, the roadmap of blue and purple veins that appear on the calves and thighs?
Again, this is an area heavily influenced by the unique biological milestones of a woman's life. Varicose veins are essentially a failure of the one-way valves inside the veins.
The valves that fight gravity.
Yes, to pump blood from the legs back up to the heart. Pregnancy is a massive mechanical and hormonal stressor here.
How does pregnancy damage the veins?
Well, the growing uterus puts immense physical pressure on the pelvic veins. It creates a literal traffic jam of blood trying to return from the legs.
Oh, wow. So the blood just backs up.
It backs up.
Oh.
At the same time, massive surges in estrogen and progesterone actively relax and weaken the muscular walls of the veins. Over time, those walls stretch, the tiny valves inside fail to close completely, and the blood pools and flows backward.
It just sits there.
It does. The vein engorges, bulges, and becomes a tortuous varicose vein. Men certainly get them, particularly if they have jobs requiring standing for decades. But the combination of pregnancy and female hormones makes the incidence rate exponentially higher in women.
So if we look at the whole picture so far, the mirror is showing us the loss of melanin in the hair, the structural collapse of the face, the shifting of fat to the belly, the failure of the veins.
It's a lot of visible wear and tear.
It is, but the text makes a very sharp pivot at this point.
It goes deeper.
It does. The sagging skin and the gray hair are just the cosmetic warning lights on the dashboard. The truly profound, life-altering shifts are occurring deep within the chassis, completely invisible to the naked eye.
The internal systems.
Right. To understand why the muscles are sagging and the posture is collapsing, we have to look at the failing electrical grid that controls it all. We are moving into the command center. The brain, the sensory organs, and the central nervous system.
This is the transition where aging ceases to be a conversation about aesthetics and vanity, and becomes an intense reality check about fundamental human function, cognition, and identity.
Let's confront the shrinking brain.
It sounds so grim.
It sounds terrifying. The idea that the organ containing everything that makes me me is physically withering away inside my skull.
It is a universal biological reality, sadly. As we age, the overall volume of the brain physically decreases. The fluid-filled ventricles inside the brain actually expand to fill the empty space.
So we literally lose brain matter.
We do. But what is truly remarkable, and what the handbook details extensively, is that the pattern of this neuronal loss is highly gendered.
Of course it is. Everything is.
Men and women do not lose brain mass in the same places or at the same rate.
Right. The material points out that men tend to lose volume much faster in the frontal and temporal lobes.
The executive centers.
Yes, these are the areas responsible for executive function, complex decision-making, motor skill coordination, and crucially, impulse control.
Which explains a lot of behavioral changes in older men.
It really does. Women, conversely, experience a highly pronounced atrophy in the hippocampus, which is the absolute epicenter of memory formation and spatial navigation.
And this shrinkage accelerates sharply after menopause.
Hold on, I need to look at this critically.
Go ahead.
Because if men are progressively losing their executive function and impulse control, and women are aggressively losing their capacity to form memories?
How is society functioning?
Exactly. How are older people still operating at high levels, running companies, writing books, living independent lives? The biological math you just described suggests a bleak, inevitable march toward total cognitive collapse.
It does sound like a disaster waiting to happen.
Is the brain just completely helpless against this shrinkage?
That is a phenomenal question. And the answer reveals the brilliant, built-in resilience of the human nervous system. No, the brain is not helpless at all.
Oh, thank goodness.
It possesses neuroplasticity, and there is a massive biological compensation mechanism at play, particularly in women. While women do experience that pronounced hippocampal shrinkage, studies show they consistently retain far better structural integrity in the corpus callosum as they age.
The corpus callosum being the thick bundle of nerve fibers acting as the bridge between the left and right hemispheres of the brain.
Exactly. It is the literal superhighway of communication between the two halves. Because that bridge remains structurally sound and highly myelinated in aging women, their brains are often vastly superior at bilateral communication.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, for example, language processing is typically lateralized to the left hemisphere. If a localized area in the left hemisphere begins to degrade due to age, a woman's brain is highly adept at sending a signal across that robust bridge to recruit the equivalent dormant area in the right hemisphere to assist.
Wow, it just bypasses the damage.
They literally use both sides of their brain to solve a problem that a younger person might only use one side to solve. The processing speed might slow down slightly, but the rerouting software is incredibly sophisticated.
And men?
Men, whose corpus callosum degrades faster, often struggle more with this bilateral compensation.
So the network connection drops a few bars, but the brain just builds new cell towers on the fly.
That's a great way to visualize it.
That is incredibly reassuring. Now let's talk about the hardware that feeds information into that network, the windows to the world, vision and hearing.
Crucial sensory inputs.
I found a detail in the source regarding hearing loss that blew my mind because it perfectly illustrates how biology and environment collide. The text notes that men lose high-frequency hearing significantly faster than women, and they suffer from vastly higher rates of tinnitus.
That maddening constant ringing in the ears.
Yes. Why is it so much worse for men?
This is a classic example of physiological vulnerability, exacerbated by historical societal roles. Men have generally experienced much higher rates of chronic exposure to occupational and recreational noise pollution.
Like construction sites and factories?
Heavy machinery, construction sites, factory floors, firearms, even certain loud hobbies.
And that just destroys the ear.
Well, the inner ear contains a snail-shaped organ called the cochlea, which is lined with thousands of microscopic hair cells that translate sound waves into electrical signals for the brain.
Okay, tiny hair cells.
The hair cells responsible for detecting high-frequency sounds are located at the very base of the cochlea, meaning every single sound wave that enters the ear washes over them first.
They're on the front lines.
They bear the absolute brunt of the acoustic trauma. Decades of loud noise essentially blast these delicate hair cells until they snap and die.
Wow.
Once they're gone, they never regenerate.
And that causes the ringing.
Yes. The brain, confused by the sudden lack of input from those missing cells, sometimes generates its own phantom noise to fill the void. That is tinnitus.
That's fascinating. And what about the visual feed? How do our eyes fail us as we age?
Visual aging is a universal tax. But again, the specific penalties diverge by gender. Everyone, without exception, will experience presbyopia.
Which is the need for reading glasses.
Exactly. The lens inside the eye is flexible in youth, allowing it to change shape to focus on near objects. As we age, proteins within the lens clump together, and the lens becomes rigid. It can no longer flex, meaning you lose the ability to focus up close, hence reading glasses in your 40s.
But the risks change for men and women after that.
They do. Women face a statistically higher risk of developing cataracts, where that stiffening lens also becomes clouded and opaque, blocking light entirely. Women are also at higher risk for macular degeneration, which destroys the sharp central vision needed for reading and recognizing faces.
And what happens to the men?
Men, on the other hand, tend to experience a faster rate of retinal thinning and a more rapid loss of the optic nerve fibers that carry the visual signal to the brain.
Here's where the handbook threw me a massive curveball, though.
Oh, about the voice.
Yes. Of all the biological mechanics documented in this manual, this one fact made me stop reading and just stare at the wall. The voice. The text outlines a bizarre, surprising gender reversal in how our vocal pitch changes as we march toward old age.
It is deeply counterintuitive to how we generally perceive the aging process.
Right. You just intuitively assume that everyone's voice gets weaker, lower, and gravelly. You picture the creaky old wizard or the raspy grandmother.
It's the stereotype.
But the clinical data shows that as we age, a man's vocal pitch actually tends to rise, becoming higher and thinner, while a woman's pitch tends to drop, becoming lower and deeper.
Essentially flips.
What on earth is the biological mechanism driving that?
To understand this, you have to visualize the vocal folds inside the larynx, like the strings on a guitar.
Okay, guitar strings.
The pitch of a guitar string is determined by its thickness, its mass, and how tightly it is stretched. In men, as they enter their later years, the cartilage in the larynx calcifies and stiffens. Concurrently, the actual muscle tissue of the vocal folds begins to atrophy and lose mass. They physically thin out.
Ah, and thinner strings vibrate faster.
Exactly. Thinner, stiffer strings vibrate at a higher frequency. Therefore, the aging male voice rises in pitch and often loses its deep resonance.
And for the women, why does their pitch drop?
It all comes back to the systemic shock of menopause again. The dramatic drop in estrogen alters the fluid balance and the structural integrity of the lamina propria, which is the mucosal layer covering the vocal cords.
As they swell up.
The tissue often becomes slightly edematous. It swells and becomes denser. Sometimes, a condition called Ronke's edema occurs, where fluid actually accumulates in the vocal fold space.
Making the string thicker and heavier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thicker, denser strings vibrate at a slower frequency, producing a lower pitch.
Yeah.
So the vast sonic gap that exists between male and female voices in youth actually narrows significantly as we enter our twilight years.
The mechanics of it are incredibly elegant, even as the system is technically declining.
It's a beautiful, if sad, sort of machinery.
Which acts as a perfect transition to the next major area. We've covered the fading exterior, we've explored the electrical grid and the sensors. Now we must delve into the machinery that processes the fuel, filters the exhaust, and the literal scaffolding that keeps the entire structure from collapsing under its own weight.
The really vital internal stuff.
We are entering the engine room, the organs, the digestive tract, and the skeleton.
And if we talk about the skeleton, we're talking about perhaps the most critical internal battleground of aging, particularly for the female listeners.
Bone density. It is often called the silent thief.
Because you have no idea you're being robbed until the house collapses.
Precisely. You don't feel your bones getting hollow.
To understand osteoporosis, you have to understand that bone is not dead, calcified rock.
Yeah.
It is dynamic, living tissue that is constantly undergoing remodeling.
It's always breaking down and rebuilding.
Yes. At a microscopic level, you have two types of cells locked in an endless cycle. You have osteoclasts, which break down old, damaged bone tissue, and you have osteoblasts, which follow behind them, laying down fresh, dense new bone.
So the osteoclasts are the demolition crew tearing up the old foundation, and the osteoblasts are the builders pouring the new concrete.
That's a perfect analogy. Throughout our youth and early adulthood, the builders work slightly faster than the demolition crew. We build peak bone mass.
But as we age, the builders inevitably slow down.
They do. And here is where the gender disparity becomes incredibly perilous. For women, estrogen acts as the strict foreman on the construction site.
Oh, estrogen again. It does everything.
It really does. It directly regulates the osteoclasts, keeping the demolition crew in check so they don't destroy too much. When menopause occurs and estrogen abruptly leaves the system, the foreman is gone.
So the demolition crew just runs wild.
They go into absolute overdrive. They begin breaking down bone tissue vastly faster than the sluggish osteoblasts can possibly replace it.
Which leads directly to osteoporosis.
Exactly.
The internal honeycomb structure of the bones expands. The bone becomes porous, incredibly brittle, and weak. The text specifically highlights the femur in the leg, the tarsal bones in the feet, and the vertebrae in the spine.
The weight-bearing joints.
Right. It explains why a simple slip on a rug, an impact that would just bruise a 30-year-old, results in a catastrophic, life-altering hip fracture in an 80-year-old woman.
The internal scaffolding has literally hollowed out from the inside.
And while the structural scaffolding is hollowing out, the internal plumbing and chemical processing plants are simultaneously slowing down.
The digestive system takes a huge hit.
If we look at the digestive system, we see a cascade of functional delays. The parietal cells in the stomach produce significantly less hydrochloric acid. Gastric emptying is delayed, meaning food sits in the stomach longer, leading to chronic reflux and bloating.
But the text specifically zeroes in on the thinning of the stomach mucosa and the loss of something called intrinsic factor.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that. Why is intrinsic factor so vital?
Intrinsic factor is a highly specialized glycoprotein secreted by the stomach lining. Its sole purpose in life is to bind to vitamin B12 from the food you eat.
Okay. It grabs the B12.
Right. B12 is a massive, complex molecule, and the small intestine absolutely refuses to absorb it unless it is bound to intrinsic factor. As the stomach ages, thins out, and atrophies, the production of intrinsic factor plummets.
So intrinsic factor is basically the VIP pass that B12 needs to get past the bouncer into the bloodstream.
A VIP pass, yeah, exactly.
And as we age, the club just stops handing out the passes.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You could eat a diet incredibly rich in B12, but without intrinsic factor, it passes straight through your system unabsorbed.
Wow.
This is why a massive percentage of older adults suffer from severe B12 deficiencies, which masquerade as dementia, profound fatigue, and peripheral neuropathy.
Just because of a missing stomach protein.
The brain and the nerves are starving for a nutrient that is sitting right there in the gut, unable to cross the barrier. Furthermore, the aging intestinal wall itself begins to break down.
Leaky gut.
Exactly. The tight junctions between the cells fail, leading to increased intestinal permeability. Undigested food particles, toxins, and bacteria slip through the intestinal wall and directly into the bloodstream.
And the immune system, detecting these foreign invaders in the blood, launches an attack, resulting in chronic systemic inflammation.
Which seamlessly connects us to the degradation of the cardiovascular system.
It's all connected.
It is. That chronic, low-grade inflammation acts like sandpaper on the inner lining of the blood vessels. It aggressively accelerates arterial stiffening and atherosclerosis, which is the buildup of calcified plaque inside the arteries.
And men typically develop this arterial stiffness and plaque burden decades earlier than women, right?
They do. They're the classic demographic for early heart attacks. The stress, the genetics, the lifestyle.
However, we see the estrogen effect yet again for women.
Always estrogen. Estrogen keeps blood vessels flexible and promotes healthy cholesterol profiles. Post-menopause, when that cardiovascular shield drops, a woman's risk for heart disease absolutely skyrockets.
It just catches right up.
Her arteries stiffen rapidly, and her risk profile catches up to the male demographic with terrifying speed.
The compounding failures are just staggering, and we haven't even touched on how the body fights off outside threats yet.
The immune system.
Yeah, the source material mentioned the spleen and the lymph nodes, and I was genuinely shocked to learn that they physically shrink.
People assume the immune system just gets tired.
Right. I thought it just got a bit tired. I didn't realize the actual organs were vanishing.
They undergo a process called involution. The thymus gland, which matures kidney cells, is mostly gone by middle age.
Gone.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
The active lymphoid tissue in the lymph nodes, the areas packed with naive lymphocytes waiting to identify and fight new infections, it diminishes significantly.
And what replaces it?
Fat. It is a process called lipomatosis. Adipose tissue literally physically infiltrates the lymph nodes.
So the military bases are systematically being turned into long-term storage closets for fat.
That is exactly what happens. The functional real estate is gone. This is precisely why the production of specific antibodies against novel viruses slows to a crawl.
It just doesn't have the space to operate.
Right. It explains why older adults are catastrophically susceptible to respiratory infections that a younger person fights off in 3 days. And, most crucially, from a public health perspective, it explains why vaccines are often significantly less efficacious in the elderly population.
Because the vaccine has nothing to train.
A vaccine works by introducing a harmless piece of a virus to the lymph nodes to train the troops. If the military base is full of fat and the troops are depleted, the system simply cannot mount the massive, rapid immune response required to build lasting immunity.
Okay, let's take a collective breath here.
It's heavy stuff.
It is very heavy. We have just spent a significant amount of time walking through the external fading, the collapsing architecture of the face, the brain shrinking, the bones hollowing out, the arteries turning to stone, and the immune system turning into a fat storage facility.
It's a lot of doom and gloom.
It is, frankly, daunting. It feels like an unstoppable avalanche.
Mm.
But we must remember the mission of Arnaud van der Veer's book. He did not spend 30 years researching this just to depress us.
No, not at all.
He wrote this to map the enemy territory so we can prepare. Let's pivot to the final major area of the text. Section 5, Fighting Back. The concept of dynamic weight control, or DWC.
This is the critical turning point in the philosophy of the book. This is where we shift from being passive victims, observing our own decay, to active participants in our physiological destiny.
I love that.
The handbook makes it abundantly clear we cannot stop time. The avalanche will happen. But we absolutely possess the agency to change how our tissues, our nerves, and our bones respond to the pressure of time.
The origin story of dynamic weight control is fantastic, too. Arnaud didn't develop this in a sterile lab.
No, he was in the gym.
Exactly. He teamed up with a sports physiotherapist named Henk van der Stoep. They were martial artists, essentially gym rats, who realized that the standard, static fitness protocols pushed by the industry were flawed.
Sitting on a padded bench and lifting a dumbbell up and down in a single predictable line.
Right. It wasn't just incredibly boring, but it was fundamentally flawed. They realized it was totally ineffective for preparing the body for the chaotic, dynamic realities of martial arts, or frankly, just living life.
Their realization was rooted in biomechanical truth. Life is not static. Life does not happen in isolated, perfectly balanced, single-plane movements.
A bicep curl doesn't prepare you for a fall.
Exactly. A bicep curl on a machine does not train your body to catch a slipping grandchild or recover from a trip on an icy sidewalk.
So they threw out the machines and created dynamic weight control. What is the fundamental core principle behind this system?
The core principle is applying variable resistance throughout the widest possible range of motion, forcing the nervous system to constantly adapt to shifting leverage.
And the equipment.
The absolute genius of the system lies in its brutal simplicity. You do not need a $20,000 multi-gym. You use a single piece of equipment. A weight plate, typically 7.5, or 10 kilograms, that has grips or handles molded into the sides.
A single heavy disc. That's it.
That's all you need.
And the text breaks down 5 specific modalities of training with this plate. Basic form, speed training, pure strength, stop-go, and combinations.
Very structured.
But I really want to dig into the biomechanics of the special techniques Arnaud developed, because when I read them, they sounded borderline dangerous.
They sound intense, yes.
Let's talk about punch stop. What exactly are you doing with the weight plate here?
From a neurological perspective, punch stop is arguably the most fascinating exercise in the protocol. You grip the weight plate, you accelerate it away from your body as explosively as possible, mimicking a martial arts strike.
Okay, punching with a weight.
And then, at the very end of the extension, you command your muscles to stop the weight dead in its tracks, midair.
Okay, my immediate reaction reading that was that it sounds like a guaranteed way to tear a bicep tendon or blow out a rotator cuff. You are generating massive momentum and then fighting it instantly.
If a completely untrained individual attempted it with a heavy weight, yes, injury is a risk. But when trained progressively, it is performing a crucial function. It is mimicking the harsh reality of daily life. The text explicitly states that this technique trains the neuromuscular system for real-world misses.
What exactly constitutes a miss in this context?
Think about the physics of everyday accidents. You're carrying a heavy bag of groceries, and the paper handle suddenly snaps.
Oh, sure.
Your arm, which was exerting upward force, suddenly has zero resistance and flies upward while the bag plummets. Or you're walking down the stairs in the dark, you think there's one more step, you put your full weight down, and you hit empty air.
The worst feeling.
Your body jarringly impacts the floor an inch lower than expected. Those are misses. In those fractions of a second, your joints experience a massive, chaotic peak load.
And if you only do slow, controlled lifts.
If your exercise routine consists solely of slow, highly controlled, perfectly balanced movements, your nervous system literally does not possess the software to fire the fast-twitch muscle fibers rapidly enough to stabilize the joint during that sudden, violent deceleration.
The joint hyperextends, the ligament tears.
Exactly. Punch stop is essentially installing the emergency brake software into your nervous system.
That makes perfect sense. You are training the brain to slam on the brakes before the car goes off the cliff.
Great analogy.
Now, the other specialized technique that fascinated me and honestly sounded even crazier was fall resistance.
Oh, this one is wild.
You literally hold the weight plate, open your hands, drop it, and then try to snatch it out of the air right before it hits the floor.
Yes. And the physiological why behind this seemingly reckless movement is profound.
How does that help?
Well, in standard weightlifting, your muscle provides the concentric resistance. You push against gravity. In fall resistance, you are using gravity as an extreme accelerator. When you drop that plate, it accelerates at 9.8 meters per second squared.
It's falling fast.
Fast and heavy. When you suddenly arrest that downward momentum by catching it, the abrupt kinetic energy transfer sends a massive explosive impulse deep into the central nervous system.
It's a localized shock wave.
Exactly. It is a controlled mechanical shock. And this shock wave forces the recruitment of the deepest, fastest-acting motor units in the muscle belly, the exact same high-threshold neural pathways that are absolutely crucial for recovering from physical trauma.
So by intentionally subjecting your body to these controlled microtraumas, you are forging a skeletal and nervous system that is highly resilient to actual accidental trauma.
Yes, you are inoculating yourself against gravity.
It all ties back beautifully to a philosophical observation Arnaud made about the animal kingdom in the Handbook. He notes that animals don't check into a spa to heal.
No, they certainly do not.
They don't lie down and rest for a month.
The text makes a pointed observation. A wounded animal in the wild rarely lies completely still to recover. If they lie still, they die. A biological organism only recovers optimally if the tissue is continuously stimulated to heal through necessary, varied activity. Total rest leads to rapid atrophy.
It is the clinical application of the phrase, motion is lotion. Dynamic weight control is essentially a safe, controlled replication of the unpredictable, chaotic physical demands of simply being alive.
It forces the brain, the peripheral nerves, the muscle fibers, and the bones to engage in constant rapid-fire communication to adapt to shifting loads.
Which is the ultimate evidence-based defense against the systemic physical declines we have been cataloging for the past hour.
You can't outrun it entirely, but you can brace for it.
You cannot permanently stop the osteoclasts from breaking down your bones, but by catching a falling 10-kilogram plate, you send a massive piezoelectric signal through the femur and the spine that screams, hey, we're experiencing massive mechanical load down here.
We still need this structural support.
Keep this bone dense, and the builders get the message and keep working.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's synthesize this incredibly deep journey we've been on today.
Let's do it.
We started by looking in the mirror, examining the surface level changes, the depletion of melanin factories causing the gray hair, the structural breakdown of the collagen canvas versus the silk, the literal stretching of the facial cartilage.
The visible erosion.
We moved deeper into the torso, tracking how shifting hormones redistribute our energy reserves from the hips to the visceral organs, and how gravity acts upon weakened ligaments.
The sagging bat wings, the cellulite columns.
Right. We ventured into the command center, observing the profound, highly gendered shifts in brain volume, the deterioration of the sensory organs, and the fascinating hormonal mechanics that raise a man's vocal pitch and lower a woman's.
We inspected the engine room, mapping the hollowing out of the skeleton, the failure of the stomach to absorb vital B12, and the immune system literally turning into fat storage.
And finally, we explored Arnaud's brilliant active resistance protocol through dynamic weight control, training the nervous system to survive the chaos of gravity.
The overarching theme that emerges from digesting this massive 2026 handbook is that the process of aging is deeply gendered.
It absolutely is.
It is biologically dizzyingly complex. It is completely universally inevitable. But crucially, it is highly malleable.
We have some control.
Our daily movements, our stress levels, and our physical habits directly dictate the trajectory of that decline.
And as we close this deep dive, we must circle back to the humility of the author himself. Arnaud van der Veere's 3 decades of relentless research have provided us with this incredibly detailed, high-resolution map of the biological territory.
We understand the what and the cellular how better than any previous generation in human history.
We can pinpoint the exact enzyme that suffocates a hair follicle and the exact glycoprotein missing from the aging gut.
We have the mechanics down.
But the actual fundamental why of aging. Why does the biological clock have an inevitable, predetermined expiration date? That remains one of humanity's greatest unsolved mysteries.
The X-ray machine looking at the root cause is still showing a murky, blurred image.
Exactly. And because the ultimate why is hidden from us, the best we can do, as Arnaud fiercely advocates and embodies, is to live by example.
We have to actively participate.
We must combine our past experiences, our failures, and our acquired wisdom with our future potential. He uses a beautiful metaphor in the handbook. He calls it carrying a backpack of knowledge into our later years.
It is a backpack we use to intelligently navigate the shifting terrain, rather than blindly fighting against the storm.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today. It is a philosophical concept drawn from the very beginning of Arnaud's book, touching on the fundamental laws of physics, specifically the law of conservation of energy.
The foundational rule of the universe. Energy can never be created or destroyed. It can only change form.
Exactly. Aging, therefore, is not a process of simply fading away into nothingness. It is not an erasure. If we are biological entities bound by this universal law, then our physical energy is just transforming.
The fuel is just being allocated differently.
So, the next time you look in the mirror, not to frantically obsess over a new wrinkle, but just to check in with your vessel, do not look for signs of a battle you are losing. Don't look at it as decay.
It's just a shift.
Ask yourself this: if my physical changes are simply my biological energy shifting and changing form, what new creation, what new intellectual pursuit, or what deeper purpose is my body quietly preparing me for in this next phase of life?